Are you completely exhausted by the endless AI hype? Look, if you're a C-suite executive or a business leader, I know you are. We hear these constant, breathless promises about instant transformation. Just buy an API key, plug into a new foundation model, and watch your company revolutionize overnight. But the reality on the ground, it feels very, very different. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stripping away the abstract predictions and taking a hard, pragmatic look at a massive new empirical study from the Stanford Digital Economy Lab. We're going to zero in on the real-world return on investment of enterprise AI. Think of me playing two roles today. Part hard-nosed data journalist, asking what this actually costs to get running, and part management consultant breaking down the frameworks. Because as you'll see, success here is a gritty organizational challenge, not just a software deployment.
Here is our roadmap for today's breakdown. We're going to start with a much-needed reality check, then explore a vital economic concept called the productivity J-curve. After that, we'll unpack workflow versus task realignment, dive straight into the winner's playbook based on real case studies, and wrap it all up with the executive takeaway.
All right, let's jump into part one, the reality check. It's time to push back against the hype. 95%. Let that sink in for a second. According to a 2025 study from MIT, 95% of generative AI pilot programs completely fail to produce a measurable financial impact. 95%! Billions of dollars are being poured into these tools, yet the vast majority of these initiatives aren't moving the needle on the balance sheet even a millimeter. And here's the kicker. It's not because the AI models are bad. The tech works. It's failing because of poor workflow integration and totally misaligned organizational incentives. We are looking at a massive, glaring gap between what the technology can do in a demo and what organizations actually manage to do with it in the real world.
But hey, we aren't here to just dwell on the failures, right? We're pivoting to the strategic framework. The Stanford researchers decided to ignore the noise and look exclusively at the rare exceptions, the implementations that actually delivered sustained, measurable business value. They spent 5 months rigorously documenting 51 successful deployments. And this wasn't just one niche area. This covered 9 different industries and 14 different business functions. They essentially went in asking, what on earth did these 51 winners do differently than the 95% who failed?
Well, the answer from those winners was incredibly consistent. Take a listen to how one telecom executive in the study put it. Quote, "All the hard work is in process documentation and data architecture. If you can do those two things, everything else is quite simple." Unquote. We absolutely have to dismantle this myth of the plug-and-play AI model. The technology itself, it was consistently described as the easiest part of the whole process. It's rapidly becoming a commodity. The true moat, your actual competitive advantage, is the really hard, totally invisible work of getting your organization fundamentally ready.
Which leads us perfectly into part two, the productivity J-curve, and the structural friction that comes with it. This brings us to a foundational economic concept that you simply must understand, the productivity J-curve. Look, when you deploy enterprise AI, things are going to get worse before they get better. Why? Because you're making massive upfront investments in what economists call intangible capital. That means you are redesigning workflows, retraining your workforce, and pulling your hair out cleaning up decades of messy data. And during this necessary transition phase, your company's overall productivity actually takes a hit. It dips. That's the bottom hook of the J. The absolute most crucial takeaway for executives here is this. Do not kill your pilot programs early just because you hit this inevitable dip. That dip isn't failure. It means the real agonizing work of structural realignment is actually happening. To really grasp this friction, let's look at the hardest challenges these organizations faced. A whopping 77% of the hurdles were entirely invisible costs. We're talking about the messy human stuff. Change management, getting users to actually adopt the tech, fixing data quality, and tearing down old processes. Only 23% of the hurdles were technical or vendor-related. This right here perfectly illustrates why that J-curve exists. You aren't just buying software. You are spending your time and your budget completely overhauling human behavior and institutional knowledge. And because changing human behavior is notoriously difficult, it rarely works on the first try. Here is a super sobering statistic for you. 61% of the highly successful projects in this study had a completely failed AI project right before their current success. Think about that. Teams initially treated AI as just another IT project, they slapped it onto broken workflows, and they failed. But those failures were actually vital sunk costs. They mapped out the organizational bottlenecks and taught the company what really needed to change before they could cross that J-curve. Okay, moving into part 3, workflow versus task realignment.
You have to make a hard distinction between automating a task and reimagining a workflow. If you just use AI to help an employee write an email faster, well, you've optimized a task. That's great, but you haven't really changed the business at a structural level. True explosive ROI in the Stanford study only happened when entire workflows were completely reimagined. Look at it this way. If your customer onboarding process is totally broken, full of redundancies and bad templates, applying AI just helps you execute a terrible process a little bit faster. You've got to clean house first. And the strategic advantage of reimagining those workflows, it is massive. Let's look at the numbers. In a standard human-in-the-loop model where a person basically sits there and approves every single AI action, organizations yielded about a 22% median gain. Not bad. But if you overhaul the workflow to allow for secure escalation models, where the AI handles 80% or more of the high-volume work completely autonomously, and humans only jump in to review the complex exceptions, you capture a massive 71% median gain. Overhauling the workflow from approval to secure escalation is exactly where the real value lives.
So how do we actually do this? Let's dive into Part 4, the winner's playbook, focusing on concrete organizational solutions. Let's ground this with a real example. Take this semiconductor case study. They had a great idea: deploy AI to help their field service engineers fix complex machines on the fly. But the moment they started, they hit a brick wall. They realized their service manuals were scattered everywhere, totally outdated, and written in fragmented, inconsistent formats. The initial AI deployment completely choked. Getting to success didn't mean buying a better, more expensive AI tool. It required step 3, manually re-architecting their unstructured data. They had to fix the root organizational mess. But once they finally did that hard work, they scaled a highly successful tool to thousands of workers, literally turning a frustrating 45-minute manual search into an instant, accurate answer.
Now, here's a fascinating twist on the data problem. You might be sitting there thinking you need perfectly pristine data before you can even touch AI. Well, not exactly. Successful deployments actually use large language models to fix the messy data itself. They build these multi-stage pipelines where the AI extracts unstructured data from old PDFs, translates legacy code like COBOL, and structures it into something usable. So they aren't just waiting to feed clean data to the AI, they're actually using AI as the bulldozer to clean up their entire data architecture in the first place. It's brilliant. So if we take a step back, the absolute most crucial point is this: 71% of these successful organizations treated the AI model itself as a fully interchangeable commodity for their routine tasks. I really want to repeat that. They didn't care which specific brand name model they were using from week to week. The model wasn't their secret weapon. Their proprietary data pipelines, their deeply mapped workflows, and their relentless change management, that was the actual difference maker. Which brings us to Part 5, the executive takeaway, the final verdict for you and your teams. Here is your playbook, neatly summarized. First, stop endlessly shopping for the perfect foundation model and start doing the invisible work: process documentation and data architecture. Second, invest in measurement early on so you know exactly what crossing that J-curve looks like. Third, don't just speed up isolated tasks, redesign your workflows to support those escalation models to capture that massive 70% median gain. And finally, you absolutely must give your teams permission to fail. Remember, 61% of the winners failed first. If failure is seen as a career-ending risk in your company, you are never going to survive the J-curve. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Think about your current AI strategy right now. If your fiercest competitor can buy the exact same AI model off the shelf tomorrow for pennies, where is your actual competitive advantage? The answer isn't in the software. The answer is in your organization's willingness to do the hard, gritty, and visible work. Build that organizational moat, and the technology will take care of the rest. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.